I've got a superstar panel, or they might just be a gallery of rogues, I'm not sure. See how we go, so should be good. So Nella, could you just set the scene for us on where we are in terms of industrial demand, why it seems to be the most popular section of the sector at the moment?
Absolutely. So taking off my South Coast hat, I'm also the managing director of Amiri. So we're commercial real estate advisors throughout the UK. We're doing national acquisitions for a number of industrial occupiers. So one of our core clients is Halo ARC. We've acquired 18 properties in the last 15 months for them. So we've got a pretty handle on the industrial market. We have found it very competitive in acquiring premises throughout the whole of the UK, purely because there is just not enough demand coming through. Our client is a B2 use, and the majority of the new developments coming forward, again with landlords going down the ESG route, they are not bringing forward enough B2 accommodation. So that again is driving up the rents. So just to give you an idea in terms of the whole of the UK, down on the South Coast, we would say that some of the top rents, some of the smaller ones are around the £12.50 per square foot. But then if you go up to London, some of the deals that we're doing are at £25 per square foot. To give that a comparison to the office market, as I mentioned, premium rents for Southampton, for example, is at 25. So the industrial rents are really starting to push the office market. So that's where we're seeing the surge. Obviously, in terms of the South Coast, we only have half the land, so there is limited supply in where they can actually build modern industrial units. Again, given the drivers from an ESG point of view, that is generally driving the rents. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview.
Can we just whilst we've got you there, can we just explore a little expectations from investors, tenants, occupiers in terms of sustainability? Is it purely legislatively driven, or is it actual demand? Will people pay more for a better building?
I think depending on the occupiers, they would pay more for the building. Occupiers that have a CSR agenda, and particularly we're going through the B Corp verification at the moment, so we understand that from our clients, they need to be hitting key markers, so they can't take a rundown industrial unit if the industrial unit is going to be where they're going to bring clients to, it's not appealing. And ultimately, everyone, you talk about the office market and the hospitality sector, actually a lot of the industrial buildings that are being brought through and being developed, the finishings are at the same levels, because all these companies are now thinking about their employees. The war for talent is intensifying regardless of what sector you're in. Everyone thinks about the industrial market as being dirty users, but actually you've got laboratory, you've got STEM, and across the South Coast we have a huge industries from aerospace, pharmaceutical, defence, and those guys are not going to be sitting in a shed that's falling down, holes dripping through, for example, so they want top stack. And obviously with the Solent Freeport, that adds another layer of why it's an opportunity for occupiers to be relocating.
Can we pass on to David, if we may? David McGougan's developed with Panattoni. You've got 3 million square feet under development at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, we're generally doing on average about 3 million a year. So yeah, and on the South Coast alone, if we sort of shift it a bit further along the corridor to the M23, we've got 3 live schemes at the moment with just under 1 million square feet spec going on in those 3 schemes alone.
In terms of the challenges and opportunities, David, do you see it? Is it balanced?
I mean, I'd say, reiterating what Nella said about maybe, taking it to a regional level of the South Coast, the challenge down here is you do have the back to the sea. You do have pockets of land that are protected. So, you're going west towards Bournemouth, you've got the New Forest, you go east, you've got the South Downs. So it's that sort of correct land allocation of sites strategically for the future that will bring through a new wave of industrial stock that I think is going to be the real challenge in bringing forward the right types of development, the right locations for the occupiers.
In terms of the demand, you must be looking, even if you're selling to investors, you must be looking at that because they're looking at the tenants.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, demand-wise, when you look countrywide, obviously during the pandemic, you saw a real paradigm shift in terms of the logistics aspect of industrial. Nella talked a bit about the fact that the South Coast has a really diverse range of occupier types, but when you talk nationally, logistics is probably the key to that. And a lot of people had a chance to look at and analyse their supply chains, and a firm like Hermes, for example, burned through a 5-year business plan in 12 months, trying to update, modernise, look at where the gaps were in terms of their customer service and delivery. And that is something you still see at the moment. We're really seeing a flight to quality as well. So the ESG agenda is sat right at the top of most of these occupiers' hit list. They have to, for their own supply chains by 2030, show that they're carbon neutral, that they're doing their bit. So those kind of older redundant buildings of the past, I think, will be what we see almost as the opportunity for the redevelopments of the future. And yeah, as you look sort of going forward, that is probably our focus, is looking at older redundant sites that need redevelopment on brownfield land as opposed to going for those greenfield targets.
And in terms of your pipeline and the development schedule, from finding the site to having a product to sell?
Yeah, I mean, it's the site, we actually get quite a few sites coming across our desks, as you can imagine, but it's been quite selective. So in terms of the way we look at things, we would look at going into markets where there really is a core undersupply of speculative development, and I would hold some of the South Coast in that vein, and probably, going back east, we were talking about our site at, say, Shoreham Airport at Burgess Hill. These are two locations where there's not been any real spec development of any meaningful, note for 20 years. The M27 corridor itself obviously has pockets of infill development that have occurred over the last sort of 5 or 10 years, but it's really identifying those places where you can identify an existing sort of cluster of industrial, sort of an existing customer base, but where speculative development hasn't been prevalent, because our model really is based on buying land, getting it built, and letting it as quickly as you possibly can.
If we could pass on with David.
That's actually a good model.
It works.
Not letting is always a challenge.
Construction surveyor. I'm interested really, David, in the procurement and delivery, and how we bring the concept to a reality.
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges that we're seeing this nationally, but particularly down on the South Coast, is this challenge of land value being distorted either by life sciences. Through the pandemic, it was industrial and logistics, and now it's residential. And without a local plan, I think we struggle. So the first point I would make, just in terms of looking at what the development cost might be for industrials, being really clear about the brand across our area of the South Coast. Central South should be a brand that investors understand, and then they can start to direct how they want to fund long-term money. That's the key. Second point, just in terms of, if you're taking a sort of high-level look and coming down, is multimodal transport. So we touched on earlier in the previous session as well. So industrial isn't sort of dirty and nasty car mechanics. Actually, it's an awful lot of other very exciting stuff that we're calling and classing industrial, but actually when you look at some of the occupiers, they prefer to be in an office, they just can't wait for that office to become available. So what they're going to do is take a light industrial unit and fit it out and make it very mobile to suit their particular business, because they're growing at scale. So if you look at the industrial space, you've probably got incubator space, you've probably got very small sort of industrial 2 to 10 people. This is the creative maker living space. And we've got lots of examples where that's happening. Indeed, in General Open Pool at the minute are trying to redefine an area, reclassify an area, just so that they try and give breath to that. But that would be very exciting. And then you move into that small industrial, which is your last mile logistics, and a little bit more about what we really understand as light industrial, and then into bigger industrial. We have something that is unique in the Freeport, absolutely fantastic. It's a catalyst for us to redefine what big industrial can look like, and that can be a really big draw. So if we've got these different types of classification for industrial, we can then look at what the impact's likely to be around cost. The reason why I've done that is that when we look at cost at a granular level, and you're looking at how that creative maker space is going to impact the community, you are really defining and describing what that community investment is going to look like. So you are going to talk about how these spaces, as light industrial, but in fact as part of the community, these things will evolve over time. So you're going to be building housing and industrial and schools. If you're doing that, you're going to want to anchor it around somewhere. And a unique part of Central South is you've got this cluster of very clever universities. Really, really exciting. This isn't something you get elsewhere. So you've got the ability now to look at how you can create small little incubator spaces in affordable, built-up areas. So again, the intervention in terms of cost can be quite light, while you allow over time to better describe what the bigger industrial needs to look like, and then you can get clever about how much it will cost to develop. That's the key. Otherwise, if you build it in hope, that can be quite expensive. So just as an example, just give you a quick example, Portsmouth University is one of the leading lights in AI gaming. And what they're desperate for are spaces where they can incubate, trial, test, play with lots of AI gaming. And I can't imagine that there isn't a teenager who wouldn't like to have a go, quite frankly. And we've got Laser Quest going on around the corner here. So if we're open to what the skill space is, that can define what our industrial need is. If we're clever about that, we can then make sure that we're building the most appropriate. If we build appropriately, we can build an affordable product. So that's a very long story to get to where I want to get to. But did it make sense?
It was, I think, thank you. In terms of the product, are you seeing, because we tend to think of it as a tin.
Yeah, it's not a tin shed anymore. Yeah, it's very environmentally friendly. Everybody's driving around net zero. So you build it to a passive standard if you can, or passive light, what we call passive light, which is meeting all the passive standards. We're not getting an inspector in to have a test it. The investors want it, that's the key. So if I'm investing in that product, I want to make sure that that's what I need. And the other part of that net zero is what's the journey to work. The people that are going to work there and live there and use that space, what's that going, how does that look for them? We heard earlier about bike racks, etc., but that multimodal transport piece is a cost element that somebody in one annual report or another will then report on.
So, I'll pass across to John, if we may. John Daines is from Amiri, we are sponsors today, so thank you for that. And he's passionate about building, I know. So in terms of the delivery of the product, John, what are the challenges and difficulties at the moment?
Quite a few actually. When we're given a scheme, the client's gone through a lot of pain, anguish of trying to design this building. He may or may not have planning, dare I say that word. We've then got to try and get the planning amendments or the preconditions sorted out. That's the front challenge. If we haven't got all the information, we're then trying to find the information to give to the planning officers. Planning officers are changing on a daily basis. Planning's our number one challenge. I would say that it's the major thing. If we could solve the planning out, we'd have a boom tomorrow. It really would. You then into the position of are the materials available? Sadly, we had one case a few months ago where we tendered it, we won the project, only to tell the client that the panel's on a 40-week lead-in. Had we been told and been involved in the project earlier, and been involved with the contractor earlier, we could advise them which product went into planning. That would have solved many problems that we've got. But what we are doing is, like we said, there's a lot of old stock. So do we develop the old stock? Do we knock it down? Do we then redevelop it? And I think some of the fundings that were coming through are looking for zero carbon. Now, 5 years ago, nobody was asking for that, but they're asking for a lot more information because it's coming from the funders.
Are you getting more collaboration from the designers and the client and
Not enough. We could do a lot more. We really could do. Even there seems to be a little wall goes up and the tender comes out. There is no us talking to anybody. If we could get around the table, even as several contractors around the table, to find out which is the best way to build it, then that would really help.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a valuable lesson for us all.
Yeah.
There is that tendency that we design, we get planning, and we come up with a concept, and then we tender, and everybody's simply looking for the best price.
Exactly. What's happening, Alan, is that you may have, 12, 18 months to design this. We get 6 to 8 weeks just to price it, build it. That's all we get. And we have to, in that 6 to 8 weeks, find all the loopholes, where the problems are, how can we get to the solutions. If we're in earlier, even though 2 or 3 other contractors, happy to be in 2 or 3 other contractors, we can iron out all these problems and you then get a better price. You get a much better price. And you get a better price, because we actually deal with the manufacturers. So this case where we had a 40-week lead, we actually went to the manufacturer. We didn't go to the supply chain. And we dealt with the manufacturer again to get the product that the client wanted.
Yeah.
But get that earlier on, the engagement earlier with the contractors, then you solve a lot.
Yeah.
That supply chain, the supply chain, is that going to improve anytime soon?
In what way? What price? Or?
In terms of lead-in times?
On certain products, yes. It is drastically coming down. There are still products out there that are coming from the continent that we haven't got agreements with companies in the UK, so they are struggling to get the products coming in. But you are seeing it on certain products it's coming down legally.
Great. And finally, if we can come to Nicola. Nicola's a commercial property solicitor and is involved in placing people in the building at the end of the chain of
The stressful bit.
the stressful bit, apparently.
Yes, I mean, the role of the lawyer has changed over the years, but it seems to be now that we are, we've got to be much more advisory in our approach. So it's working with the agents, it's working with the clients to understand their business, what their requirements are, and a lot of the time, it's not just getting the top range premises, as it were, because they can't simply afford to. So if you have a tenant, say, that needs to have an industrial premises to carry out their work, they can't afford to get top of the range, so they pick a place, not perhaps their ideal choice. There's a lot of conversations to go on, and those conversations will be, do you need to carry out alterations to those premises? If you need to carry out alterations, can you physically carry out alterations? Do you want to comply with your minimum energy efficiency requirements? Is the landlord going to pay, or is the tenant going to pay? And the Law Society is now sort of making the lawyer's piece a much more interactive role. So, for example, there's guidance now on the minimum energy efficient standards, and indeed something called green leases, which is where the landlord and the tenant should really be working together to see how they can improve the building to make it, for the drive to net zero, because it's all about the drive to net zero now. So if you have some premises that are old, the tenant needs to carry out alterations. Is there going to be a rent-free period to allow that to happen? In terms of green leases, there's different levels, different approaches that can be taken. but really it should be a collaborative working together where you can look at how you can actually improve that building over the life of the tenancy, as well as the tenants' aspirations. We've discussed that on this that tenants have that desire for that nice space now, that they really want to have a comfortable working environment, and so things like EV for cars, power points, photovoltaic for the roof to reduce the cost of supply, which is an ever burdening cost for business. All of those things, there's conversations to be had to make you say, you're not just going to have we're not just going to talk about, is this lease fully repairing and insuring leases? Is this lease going to be something that you're going to be proud of and pleased to be, a tenant and a landlord working together to make that net zero drive, possible?
Can I just jump? Just going to jump in there, Nicola. We've obviously been doing quite an aggressive acquisition throughout the UK, and one of the key things that we're falling down with, some of these second-hand accommodation, basically the EPC is pretty low, it only has 3-phase, and all of these industrial, especially institutional industrial, sorry, this echo is really putting me off. So with these landlords, they're saying you need to be an EPCB. So they are saying you can't affect the EPC, but ultimately any industrial units going in, their operations will be letting out heat, etc. So they ultimately will be adjusting the energy performance. So what they're saying is that, right, we're going to get rid of all of these gas heaters and we're going to put in electric heaters. But then what they don't realise, in a couple of our transactions that we've just done, is that it's wiping out the entire electricity capacity. So 3-phase, my occupier is not a high intense user. And obviously Dave and I have had a number of discussions about Amazon and how they put in all of these EV charging points, and they've got to wait 4 years before they can actually utilise them. So there's not actually enough power in the grid to actually accommodate it. So there's definitely an imbalance where regulation is stipulating you need to be an EPCB, but actually the building itself doesn't actually function. So how do we kind of build that balance? What's the answer?
Well, you have to come and see me, is the answer. No, I think a lot of the time in leases there is drafting now to say that the tenant won't carry out works that will lower the EPC rating of the building. But I have had experience of a tenant that actually had to pull out of the transaction because there wasn't enough power on the estate, to enable them to carry out their role. So it's a conversation that you have to have, again, in that sort of advisory role. What are you doing? What will you need to do? And can the landlord support you? So there's no easy answer, is the answer.
David, what you probably in terms of power supply?
Yeah, I'll take that. So, power supply is going to be one of the key challenges going forward. Obviously, we've got the drive under the ESG agenda and carbon agenda to get to carbon neutral. So we talk about, EV as a concept, as a sort of move forward for the transport of the future, and taking that will change. Say the power load of 100,000 square foot building might be 300 or 400 kVA. Occupiers now are, like to say DHL, for example, 100,000 feet will need minimum of 750, because all of their vans in the future that come in will charge off of their parcel distribution figures, so they're bagging 500 kVA of power for the future, for their future fleet. Some of that can be repurposed and regenerated, through the photovoltaics. With load management, you can bring that power load down, but these occupiers now, the power demand actually is probably 3, 4, 5 times, Amazon, maybe 10 times what you might expect for a standard industrial user. And the challenge, therefore, for us all is going to be, how is that power generated in a green way moving forward in the future, and does the grid have enough capacity? Because not only just the getting the power to the building, but actually you need an import-export license to export it back to the grid. and most of the grids are at capacity at that stage as well. So what we have found, and you go back to your point on the leases, is we had a scheme in Aylesford where we had a 40 megawatt supply. We've also got a 40 megawatt export supply. So we can generate almost 100% of the roofs and car parking spaces have been sort of given PVs so that the tenant can over-generate power and sell it back to the grid. And that isn't the case in all places. But what we found there is, in terms of rents and premiums on rents, the rent was, market leading on that particular one, but the thing that was really the causal benefit to the investor, the developer, was the length of leases people committed to. So minimum of 15 years terms on those, all to blue chip, distributors that required, modern EPC, standard, BREEAM excellent. And that's what we're seeing in the market, that people that want those modern spaces will want the ability to have them to be energy efficient. And if they can self-generate power back and sell it back to the grid, all the better.
Energy
Conscious
certainty.
of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, energy certainty, you talk about people doing direct wire from solar farms and the like, and at the moment that's a bit of an unproven kind of concept because, that's just resilience of power like you would have with data. People don't want their units to lose power and be the bereft of an environmentally friendly way of generating that power, but they need continuity of power.
Time for a couple of questions from the floor. So we covered everything.
Sorry, could you say that? We'll use the microphone. I'm just asking about procurement routes and how that's been restricting unlocking this pent-up demand in the area. It is because there are some procurement routes that demand too much information occasionally. If we can get a selected tender list and we engage us early, that will actually resolve some of the problems. We're finding that we're asking some of the PQ questions on the carbon footprint. What's our carbon footprint going to be in 2030? What's evidence of that on an industrial building? Well, we haven't got any evidence of that because none of them are built all through. So how can we? Those are the questions that we're struggling with on the procurement routes.
So it's a very good question because I think I was meant to contribute to that at the beginning of the session. So thank you for that. Apologies to everybody. But the big challenge we've got with procurement is most clients want probably too much information. And everybody covers themselves by overburdening whoever it happens to be, particularly contractors, quite a lot of information that's never really going to be pertinent to the project at hand. So that's the first one. Second is single stage or two stage. I know if you're a contractor in a volatile market, you prefer two stage. A lot of clients like certainty. So early contractor engagement to better understand the buildability of risk is key to then getting into a discussion around what that procurement will look like for something that's going to get built. But client needs to build in some time, and I don't think we do enough of that in the rush to planning. We seem to see planning as being something that is a real objective. We've got to get there, but I think actually building something that's going to last for 50 years is actually quite important to get the procurement piece absolutely right and better understand all the risks before you go in. And we see it particularly in the public sector. So both sides, public sector have got a huge number of frameworks. Some work very well, some struggle, and it's about mitigation of risk. And it may be that we need to find a better mechanism that allows us to align the money supply to the understanding of risk and therefore how we deliver it. And that takes us into another subject around volumetric MMC and design for off-site manufacturing, which is, I think, the direction of travel that we need to look at next.
No, I think early engagement, we're talking about the stack side of it, we're 12, 18 months for a substation at the moment. So if you want a building built, get an architect, an engineer, and then stats. Get him on early, get that communication going. And the number one is, whoever's paying the bill, get the quote. Because so many times we get a quote and it's not in our name, and we have to go right back to the beginning to get the quote into our name, because we're paying the bill. And so you have to get the quote in our name, that's why I would say, in the name of the person who's paying the bill. No one tip.
Thank you, John. I think what we've taken up this morning, collaborative working seems to be the answer to make it happen better. Clearly there is lots of demand, buildings are improving, industrial sector is looking very bright still, and hopefully we can all benefit from that. So can we thank the panel, please?